this is Ariane from Sociable Art, and today we're going to paint a snowy Christmas tree scene. And you can order a paint at home kit at sociableart.com, and it will come with paints and brushes and a printed canvas. And the printed canvas will look like this. And you just unroll it and you attach it to a hard board or a piece of cardboard with masking tape, and then you want to have the example of the finished painting nearby so that you can use it as reference. And here I'm just attaching the canvas to a sturdy piece of cardboard, and I've got some masking tape ready. Really, if you have enough masking tape, you want to just put masking tape along the entire edge of each side, right up to, there's a little bit of white along the outside of the canvas, and you want to cover all of that up so that you can just paint, right off the side of the canvas onto the masking tape. And then when you strip off the masking tape, you'll have kind of a framed painting. So right here, I'm using a little less just because I was running out of masking tape, so I wasn't sure I would have enough. And you want to secure that. Otherwise, your printed canvas could have a tendency to kind of bubble up a little bit or kind of wrinkle if you haven't got it securely fastened into place. So you can, if you don't have an easel, you can just put it on a board, just lay it flat on the table to paint. It doesn't have to be on an easel by any means. And you want to get your paints ready. You want to have a water cup. You want to have a paper towel handy for cleaning your brushes. And so as soon as I finish taping this, we'll get started painting. So in your kit, if you purchased one, you would have a tool like this, and that's for getting your paint out of your little containers and into the palette. Now, I like to use sort of like a plate or something instead of a palette sometimes. It's easier to mix colors. So that's up to you. You can use a styrofoam plate or paper plate too. And I've got here my sketch pad because I like to do a little color study before I start. And that will prevent you from mixing a color wrong and putting it on the canvas and being like, oh, now I'm stuck with this color that I don't like. So I have mixed some blue with a little bit of black to create a slightly darker blue. So you have blue in your kit, you want to add just a little bit of black and get a color like that. And then next to it, I've created a dark green by adding a little bit of black to the green that's in the kit. And you can put underneath the color that you mix, you can kind of put a little guide of how you got that color too. So the first green I created, I thought was a little bit too light, so I added a little more black to it, and below it I'm just showing how I got that color. And mine is not just green. I've on the second color I have added a little bit of blue to it. So it's blue, green, and a little black. I like to mix my colors first so that they'll be all ready and I can just continue to paint instead of stopping and mixing a color. Just make sure you mix enough of it because you don't want to run out of the color before you're finished with an area. That's an error that a lot of beginners make, is not mixing enough of the color. Also, you might want to get your brushes a little bit damp because they make a little stiff if it's the first time they've been used. And I'm going to use the brush. It's called a round brush. It does not have a flat side to it. And I'm going to use that to do my sky, because if you press out that brush, you can get, it kind of widens out, like the bristles will spread out and you'll get a wider kind of nice brush for this. So here I am using my sky color, which it's night in my picture, so it's blue mixed with just a little bit of black. And I'm doing some long brush strokes. It's very important to pay attention to how you do your brush strokes. So like here, when I go around this tree, since I'm painting around a printed design, I'm kind of trying to get the idea of what the branches on the pine tree look like. So I'm doing these brush strokes around where the pine branches are, but then I'm going to go back and smooth those brush strokes out into the sky so that eventually all my brush strokes are tending to go generally in the same direction. So you'll see me doing these sweeping, short little back and forth strokes And if you have a larger brush or you want to use one of the other brushes to smooth out your brush strokes, you can do that as well. And also, I recommend sometimes you might want to put a second coat. If you have the patience and the time, you might want to go back and put a second coat on some of these areas so that you'll have a smoother look. All the brush strokes will disappear once you add that second coat of paint. So here I am just filling in again, going around the pine trees with a kind of a stroke that goes in between those branches, and then doing long sweeping strokes up in the sky. And I'm using just that one shade at this point, but if you want to add little bits of white into it as you go, you can if you want to get a little variation of the color. Remember that this is your painting, so I'm showing you how to do it so that it looks like the finished one that I created. And I'm showing you in this video how to do that, but you can do it any way you want. So if you want purple in your sky, go ahead and do that. Purple is created by mixing blue with the red and maybe a little white added to it. Because you can mix other colors than those that are in the kit that you got. And also, if you want it to be daylight, make it a lighter blue sky. That's completely up to you. It's your painting. So right now I'm just continuing to fill in that sky. And when I do change my brush strokes to kind of fill in around these trees, I'm going to go back and smooth out those brush strokes and add them into the sky. One other thing I wanted to mention is if you're one of my painters that likes to be kind of spare with their paint, and you can see the canvas showing through in places, you want to make sure that you fill in that canvas. We don't want any white canvas showing through. So if you have to add a little bit of water to your paint, just a little bit, you can do that. It'll help fill in the grooves in the canvas better. Here I am adding just a little bit of white into the wet blue paint, just to give the sky just a little bit, I don't want it to be so solid. So the paint in the background has to be wet for this to blend well. And I switched to my medium brush, which has a flat edge to it, to add that in. And if your sky is not still wet and you want to add this white in, you can just re-wet the sky as I'm doing here. And then blend that white into it with these back and forth strokes. Just back and forth until it blends in. I kind of like that. It kind of looks like there might be some clouds in the sky or something like that. So remember, through this whole painting, you need to make sure you fill in all the white of the canvas. We do not want any little specks of white showing through it. It doesn't look as finished or as professional. So make sure to do that. And sometimes adding a little bit of water to your paint can help. You don't want to add so much that it starts looking like a watercolor. I mean, unless that's the style you're going for. If it starts looking like a watercolor, you're just removing too much pigment from the paint, and you might want to not add quite so much. Okay, here I'm going to start filling in the tree, and then in a moment I'm going to say, wait, there's something else I want to do before this. So don't start filling in your tree yet, because there's one step that'll make it easier to do this painting if we fill in the snow underneath the tree first. And why is that? It's because we want to do everything that's underneath. So that's why we did the sky first, because it's in the background. And the snow is underneath the tree. So we're going to put the tree on top of this snow. So I'm going to go ahead and put the snow in now. And using that same medium brush, I'm using mostly white paint, but I've added a little bit of that same blue that I used in my sky. So it's the blue mixed with a little bit of black, so I have more of it left. And I'm doing white under the tree, and I'm especially making it just a little darker when it gets close to this little hill that the Christmas tree is sitting on. So it's white mixed with that blue that's in the sky, but I'm adding just a little bit more of the blue when it gets closer to the tree, so it's a little darker there on that hillside. Notice that you can mix the color right on your canvas. So I'm adding white, and then I'm dipping into that deeper blue and adding it right into the canvas, and I can mix it by just doing a back and forth brush stroke. And then I'm filling in the snow that's in the foreground of the painting and underneath the Christmas tree. So underneath the Christmas tree, there might be a little bit of shadow. So you're going to add some of that blue again to your snow underneath the tree. But for right now, I'm just using the brush to just add a lot of white. And I'm trying to make sure that I have a lot of it on my brush, because I want this front area to look just a little textural, meaning there's going to be so much paint that it'll look like kind of 3D look, like someone, like it has just fallen and there's little clumps of it on the ground. And you might not be able to see that in this video, but if you use enough of the white paint, you'll have a little bit of texture on there. So I'm starting out with just straight white, but I am going to be adding some of the blue into it. I just want to get this all covered with wet white paint, and then it's easier to mix in the other blue shade. Okay, so I've covered the whole area, and at any time if I'm moving too fast, which I probably am, just pause the video and you can just restart it when you're ready. So here I am adding the same color blue that was in the sky, and I'm adding it into that wet white paint so it blends in as I go. And if you add too much and it's really taking over the white, you want to stop, get that off of your brush, add white back in. You don't want it to become dark blue down here. You want it to still be mostly white. And you can see how I'm sort of dabbing with the brush. I am not doing long blending strokes. I'm dabbing because I want this to look like there's some dimension to it. Dab, dab, dab with that color. And then I'm going to go back to the white and add some dabs of that on top of the blue. Get it to blend in even a little bit more. I don't want it to be totally smooth. I want it to be textural. So that's why I'm doing the dabbing. Okay, you can see, maybe you can see the texture on there if I hold it up close like this. And then, now that we've done that, we can start adding in the tree color. And when you do this, you're going to be adding in green mixed with a little bit of blue and then some black added. Now I want this to be dark because it's nighttime, but I want to have the tree up front to be even darker, like a black. So I want to make sure it's not so dark that it will just blend in with the tree up front. So keep that in mind, and your colors that you create in your palette will always dry darker on the canvas. So whatever you create in the palette is gonna end up darker. And if you start painting in and you don't like the color you've got, then just adjust it and paint over it. Now when I'm filling in, I am leaving some little white areas where the snow is on top of the tree, because I figured if you are a beginner, you might want to leave those areas. But it's really fine to paint over them if you feel like you can, you know, kind of figure out how to put snow on the tree afterwards. Those are just the areas where snow is going to be. So I've sped up the video so that I can just fill in those trees and leave those gaps. If I were to do it on my own, I would fill in the whole tree with that green and blue and black, and then add the snow on top. But if you're worried about finding where the snow should go, you can leave some spots in the canvas where the snow is going to be. But as I said, I would fill it all in, and then just add the snow as it dries. Now this tree in the front is going to be a darker shade. It's going to be black, or black mixed with a little bit of green is what I did, I think. A little of the green I just used. Just add more black to it. So black mixed with that green and blue shade I just used. And you want to pay attention to your brush strokes as I did on the other tree, and just kind of make sure that you're thinking that this is a pine tree and it's going to have branches that look like a pine tree. I'm using the medium brush because it has a flat side, but it also has a skinny edge to it that you can do some branches with. Sorry that my hand is in the way, that you can't see, but I'm doing the top of the tree where there's branches, and these branches on these pine trees stick upward. They kind of curve upwards on the top. So I'm doing that, and then I'm leaving spaces for the snow. But as I said, it's not necessary. You could always just fill in the whole tree, let it dry, and then add the snow in on top of it. So I'm going to show you how I'm doing. I'm making sure to do the branches sticking out on the sides, but don't worry if you're not getting a lot of definition, like you can't see it very well against the trees behind it yet, because when you add the snow is when you will really make this Christmas tree stand out against the trees behind it. So, you know, hopefully when you add these little branches in black, you can see that this is a separate tree. But if not, you have another chance to do that when you add the snow. So I'm using my brush to add the branches on the side, and then filling in the center and leaving some of the areas where the snow is going to be on this tree. And you do have to pay attention to your brush strokes on the outside, especially. You want to be thinking, this is a pine tree, this is what the pine tree branches look like. So I sped up the video so you can pause it if you want, and it's just filling in the rest of this tree in the same manner. And actually, mine got a little bit crooked. Okay, now I'm going to use the round brush to add snow to the trees in the background. And the snow on the trees in the background is going to be the color of the sky, so hopefully you still have some of that left. Maybe mix with just a little bit of white. We don't want it to be very light. In fact, when I start out here, I think I've done it a little too light, because it is still night and these trees are in the background, so the snow on them is going to be darker than the tree in the front. So just keep that in mind, and I'm filling in where there are white spots in the canvas, but I definitely want you to keep in mind, what does it look like when snow falls on a pine tree? And if you've ever seen it, or if you can imagine what a pine branch looks like and what it would look like to have snow fall on it, it would clump on there in some spots, and in some spots would be bare because it would fall off onto the ground, and there would be some little dots of snow in there too, and maybe there would be some areas where the snow is on some pine needles, so you can see some little strokes in there where the snow landed on individual pine needles. So some clumps, some little pine needles covered with snow. And eventually I'm going to speed this up so I can fill in the rest of the background in this manner. And if you filled in the entire tree, you just want to make sure that you let that dry before you start adding in the little clumps. So if you didn't leave the little white areas, then you want to let it dry and then add them on top of the green. and make sure to fill in every white area of the canvas that is showing through. We don't want any white areas. So I'm just going to continue to fill in the areas that are showing white, except for the tree in the front. I'm going to fill these in with this shade of blue. And you can see up close what that looks like. Okay, so now I'm going to add the snow onto the tree that's in the front, the Christmas tree. And this is the snow on this one is going to be pure white. So I'm adding white paint into the areas where the canvas is showing through. And it's really important on this tree to make sure to get snow on the branches that are sticking up, kind of curving into the sky on the sides of the tree in particular, because this will be what makes it stand out against the trees in the background. So I'm making sure, using the round brush, or you could use the medium brush, it has a nice edge to it, but make sure to add snow on those branches, because definitely would the branches, how they stick up, would catch some snow. And then there's some clumps on the inside. Make sure to fill all those blank areas of canvas, and add some dots of snow in there too. And you can just go through and fill in all those areas, and remember to keep thinking, what does it look like when snow falls onto a pine tree? And if you haven't seen it, you can kind of imagine how it would clump and on some of the branches and fall off on others. So one thing I want to make sure you don't do, this is something people commonly do, is you tend to make patterns. And in real life, in actuality, everything's kind of random. There's no patterns. So try to make sure that you don't make your tree look polka dotted or like everything is totally evenly spaced. It just doesn't work that way in nature. So if you can just try to be random with how you have the snow on there. And if it looks like my tree is slightly crooked, that's because I was painting this at an angle, so that you could see it in this video. And whenever you paint, you need to make sure you're sitting directly in front of your canvas, because if you're off to one side or another, it will kind of distort it and make it look kind of crooked. So I'm going to continue to fill in all these areas with snow, kind of try and make it look random. And then in the next part, we're going to be adding in our lights. So I'm going to let you finish filling in all this snow. So the next thing I'm going to do is add the star on the top of the tree. And for that, you're going to want to use your skinniest little brush. And you don't want to overload it. You want to have very little paint in your brush. And you want to kind of smooth it out on the edge of your palette to make sure that it's not overloaded, because you want to use a very light touch and have very little paint on your brush in order to get a nice thin line for that star. Nice light touch, not very much paint in your brush, to get a really nice thin line. And keep a paper towel handy, and if it comes out wrong, wipe it off, because it's hard to correct around it. So I'm just going to do a straight line up and down first, and then I'm going to do a line across. So I make a cross, and then I'll do an X on it to give you the look of the star. And after that, I'll start adding my lights on the tree. And so you want to have your colors all ready. And when I add the lights on the tree, I'm going to start by putting a dot on each place where I want there to be a light. And then I'll use my brush to circle around it in widening arcs until I run out of paint. So I put a dot, and here's a dot of red, and then I'm going to circle around the red until it looks like a glow. So here I go, circle, circle, circle until it looks like a glow. Now the thing I want you to keep in mind, you have to wait until your white paint is dry. I went ahead and did this before it was, because I'm doing a video. You can see here's the glow, but you want to wait for that to dry. You're going to smear it or use a blow dryer to dry it. I'm going to speed up the video in a moment to fill in the rest of my lights, but just know that we have 4 different colors and we do them all in the same way. A dot, and then we circle around it to get the glow. And we'll go back afterwards and we'll make the dot in the center show up better. So don't worry about that. Just do a dot and then circle around it. It's okay if you lose the dot in the center. And use all 4 colors, unless you want to use other colors. Pink and purple are great too if you want that in your tree. And there's also going to be a glow on the snow beneath where the light is, so don't be afraid to add that too. Okay, I've filled in all of my lights, as you can see. And so now I've taken the wooden end of the brush and I dipped it in the paint. I'm going to go through and I'm going to add a dot in the center with the wooden end of my brush to all of my lights. So it looks like that's the bulb on each one. It's going to show a little bit better. So I'm going to go through and do all the dots for every color, and you can take your time doing that. And then the next thing that we'll want to do is add snow to our painting. And there's 2 different ways to do that. You can do it in the same way I'm doing these little dots for the lights. You can use the wooden end of your brush to dot all of your canvas, and that's the safest way and the cleanest way. But you know, the snow dots might be a little bit bigger than you want them to be, so there is another option too. But as I said, using the wooden end of your brush and just dotting around is the cleanest way and safest way to not mess up your painting. Just make sure you don't do your snow flakes too evenly spaced like it's polka dotted. And the other way to do it is to load your brush and do this flicking thing, which I'm going to show you. But just know that if you choose to do that, sometimes you might get some spatters on your painting that don't look like snowflakes. And also sometimes the spatter will get all over the place and get in places you don't want it to get other than your canvas. And it will also maybe fling back on you and get in your hair and on your face and everything like that. So here's me dotting with the wooden end of the brush. And then in a moment, I'm going to show you, you load your brush. Your brush should be slightly damp, and then you're going to put some white paint on it. Here I've got the round brush, the bigger round brush, and then I hit it like this. Just hit it with my hand gently, and it just flings bits of paint all over the canvas to look kind of like a more natural snow. But you might want to practice this on another piece of paper. prior to doing this on your actual painting, because I would hate for you to fling a long line of white paint onto your painting and kind of mess it up. So if you want to be safe, just use the wooden end and just do dots. And then when you finish that, you'd want to sign your name, because you should be proud and sign your name on this beautiful work of art. And then you can remove your masking tape. You can save your painting. You can mount it to a piece of board or mounting board and then frame it. Or you can trim the sides and put it on a cradled wood board. Cradled wood boards are available at any art or craft store. Or just like I said, mount it and frame it. I recommend you do that. So here is our finished painting. Thank you so much for painting with me. I'm so glad that you watched the video. And if you liked it, please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. Thanks so much. This is Ariane. Bye.